All right. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon to you. I'm speaking from London. I'm in London, UK at the moment, and we're still in the morning, just about. We're an hour behind South Africa time-wise. Um, so we're going to look at memory today, and I've titled this talk "Supporting Our Memory," but so some various things about memory. Hopefully, it's going to be interesting and engaging. So we'll go on to the next slide. Okay. All right. So essentially, so memory loss can occur for a variety of reasons. And some memory loss, as we're probably all aware with aging, is natural. Some degree of memory loss is natural and normal. And for example, it's normal to experience some short-term forgetfulness, such as the inability to remember a person's name you met recently. So I would imagine that most people have had an experience of that. Um, and memory loss that is not a normal part of aging is called dementia. So the first few slides of this presentation, I've got the information from Andrew Weil. Don't know if you guys have heard of him, but he's one of the pioneers of integrative medicine in the States, who works from the south of the States, from south of the States. Anyway, so here we go. Okay, so that you're likely to have heard that the most common form of dementia is Alzheimer's disease. And that's got a particular process that happens that causes that. And another common form of dementia is called multi-infarct dementia. And that is where there are small successive strokes, little clots that are passed up to the brain, and that they gradually affect brain tissue. And that is linked to cardiovascular disease. So, and memory loss can also be a result of excessive alcohol drinking over a sustained period of time, infection or repeated head trauma. So you may well have heard of, for example, sports people who later in life suffer from dementia. So that will be people like boxers, for example, or people playing contact sports such as American football, or even in rugby where there's particular head trauma. And actually in soccer, there have been cases that have come out in more recent years related to the previous footballs that were heavier leather balls, and people used to do heading practice of the ball, and that caused dementia in later life, or contributed to it. Okay, so in terms of the types of memory that we have, or two basic classifications or types of memory, we have our short-term and long-term memory. So short-term memory includes, for example, the names of people you recently met or where you put your car keys. And longer-term memory is related to things that happened in the past. So that would be so years ago, and that's stuff like, what was the name of your standard 3 teacher, what you wore to your matric dance, that kind of thing, or where you worked for your first job. So that's the kind of classification, differentiation of those types of memory. Okay. Okay, as we've said, as aging occurs, there is a gradual loss of brain cells, and that can affect the way that information is stored and retrieved. It is normal for short-term memory to progressively decline, causing difficulty in remembering details of recent events, as well as diminished ability to learn. However, memory loss from from aging, normal memory loss from aging does not affect normal functioning, um, and does not necessarily get worse over time, and that's different to dementia, which does affect normal functioning. Okay. So that's just an initial overview of the two basic strands of memory that we have: long, short-term memory, and a differentiation between some memory loss that's natural with aging and normal with aging, and memory loss that isn't, which is called dementia, and some of the types of dementia. Okay, so this I think the next part is absolutely fascinating. So there was quite a, a significant report in 2020 from a well-established group and journal called the Lancet. So it's the Lancet Commission, and they looked into dementia prevention, intervention and care, and they found that 40% of dementia cases could be prevented or delayed by modifying 12 risk factors throughout a person's life. Okay, so when we've mentioned that, we have to look at what those risk factors are. We can't just jump over this now. So that's significant kind of findings and significant areas to discuss and to probe more. So in early life, low educational attainment is related or has an association with dementia in later life. And some theories related to that suggest that when you do have a good education, you have you develop more cognitive reserve in your brain. So that means that when there's stress on the brain, maybe later in life, you've got more ability to compensate, more reserve in your brain, and yeah, and that can postpone the clinical manifestation of dementia. And this is information from Alzheimer's UK, which is a well-established dementia charity and group which does quite a bit of research around dementia. Okay, so we're still looking at low educational attainment in early life. So if you do have a reasonable education, you can have, it's thought, some improved language and memory performance, and that can protect against dementia in later life. So we've mentioned cognitive reserve, so lengthening and deepening cognitive development and function. So that can be lengthened and deepened with education in earlier life, and yeah, and associated with lower risk of dementia. So there's also an association. So low childhood school performance then has a fan out association, so ramifications in terms of adult health and behaviors later in life, which may not be so healthy for people, which can then be implicating dementia risk. So that's not directly on the cognitive reserve, but that's on some of the habits and lifestyles that that people may then live in their adult lives, which are not so helpful for them, related to low educational attainment in earlier life. And education is often associated with a higher socioeconomic status and quality of life that helps people healthy, that keeps people healthy. So those are some thoughts about why having an education in earlier life is related to delay or prevention of dementia as you get older. Okay, so in midlife, these are factors, potentially preventable factors, at least to some degree, which are associated with memory loss dementia. So hearing loss, very important. Traumatic brain injury, we've mentioned. For example, from repeated trauma in contact sports, but other causes of traumatic brain injury. Unmanaged high blood pressure. So if it's not managed, then that can increase the cardiovascular disease, and it can then increase the risk of those mini strokes and the so-called multi-infarct dementia. Increased alcohol intake beyond a certain threshold and for a certain amount of time. And there is also some risk, not a huge increased risk, but there is some risk associated with obesity. Okay, so I wanted to touch on a couple of those particularly, so I thought they were really very interesting. Okay, so hearing loss. So this has really come to the fore, I would say, in the last, like recently, in terms of something that's being that is important to attend to. So certainly we are, I'd say, more aware of that as physicians. So if older people or even middle-aged people come with hearing loss, it's important that it's attended to. And for example, if people need hearing aids, it's better to get that sorted out early. So I think that these figures are remarkable, the statistics. So hearing loss can be linked to an increased risk of dementia, with some studies estimating that hearing loss may be responsible for 8% of dementia cases. So a study not so long ago in 2023 by Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health showed that older adults with more severe hearing loss are more likely to develop dementia, but those who use hearing aids may have a lower risk, as we've said. Other studies have found that mild hearing loss doubles the risk of dementia. These are not small figures, small amounts. These are significant. Moderate hearing loss triples the risk of dementia. Severe hearing loss increases the risk of dementia by nearly 5 times. So that, I think, is very interesting. Whoops, sorry, I just go back one slide. Okay, so, and I thought I would touch on obesity. So apparently obesity can increase the risk of developing dementia, particularly if it occurs between the ages of 35 and 65. One analysis of 19 long-term studies found that obesity during this age range can increase the risk of dementia by about 30% later in life. So you see, relatively to the risk of hearing loss related to dementia, this is quite a bit smaller. So if you remember, mild hearing loss may increase the risk of dementia by twofold, which is 100%, obesity just by 30%. And severe hearing loss, we had something like eight times the risk potentially of developing dementia. So those are factors in midlife that potentially are remediable or treatable, manageable, at least to some degree, or avoidable. Okay, so later in life, factors that they found that may relate to dementia include smoking, depression, social isolation, physical inactivity. So as far as I can see, pretty much any talk I've ever done, in terms of the things to manage that condition, physical activity has got at least some part to play, pretty much. So that's interesting. Air pollution can contribute to dementia, as can diabetes. And again, I wanted to touch on one or two of these. So I thought social isolation can lead to an increased risk of developing dementia. It relates to whether a person lives alone and whether they see friends and family regularly or engage in social and community activities. So I wanted to emphasize this really. I think as human beings, there has been just a lot of evidence in the last 10, 20 years, particularly about the benefits to our health, not just our psychological health, but our physical health, of being in communities, of having that that relationship with other human beings, of that connection. And there have been studies have shown an increase in levels of certain hormones which are beneficial for the body when people are in that connection. And and that's what, if I may say so, that's what you guys are doing in your program here with Chabad. You're meeting with other people, you are connecting with other people, and it's good. It's good. It's good psychologically, mentally. I mean, we just feel good when we have that. And it's also good. You've also got the physiological backup for doing that. Studies have shown how good it is for the hormones and also for the heart. And they've done studies on healthy communities where people are living healthier and longer, and they've done some studies including blue zones, and you can find information on that. And part of what's in that mix is the social cohesion of those communities. So social isolation is very important to try and combat that. So I thought I would touch on exposure to air pollution. So exposure to high levels of air pollution increases a person's risk of developing dementia. It also contributes to other long-term conditions. So air pollution includes very small particles from traffic fumes and from burning wood in a fireplace. It's not possible to say that air pollution causes dementia, but people exposed to more air pollution are more likely to develop dementia. So that's interesting. And maybe is something to deal with on a regional level, or even on I don't know, a wider governmental level, but there is some association with air pollution. Okay, so well then we're doing we're doing an initial journey through this whole subject of memory. So I'm going from some of the modifiable, potentially risk factors to dementia, to some basic categories of things that we can do to help our memory. So in summary, exercise your mind. Okay, so and I'm going to talk more about particular things that we can do. So for example, crossword puzzles, I'm going to do that later, a few more specifics. Crossword puzzles, mind games, challenging reading or educational classes can all help you keep the brain agile and strong. So I think you're currently in an educational class, and probably more this morning, so you're already doing that. So exercise your mind, exercise your body. And so some physical exercise, and I want to emphasize again that the physical exercise should be within your limits and ability. And if you're not sure what you can do, maybe the input of a biokineticist, for example, or physiotherapist about what you can do may be helpful. But exercise your body as a general theme is definitely helpful. Okay, so essentially, so eating a healthy diet, and the kind of generic healthy diet that people talk about nowadays is an anti-inflammatory diet. And I would say that diets, there's not a one diet that fits all necessarily. And so it may need to be tailored and nuanced, and even speaking to a nutritionist may be helpful. But essentially, I think we're often aware vegetables and fruits are the best sources of antioxidants. Tea and dark chocolate, not too much, can help. Cold water fish, for example, mackerel, freshly ground flax seeds and walnuts provide omega-3s. Those are some components of an anti-inflammatory diet. Avoiding alcohol. So I would say avoiding excessive alcohol. So if you have a bit of alcohol, so that is okay. And I mean, the recommended limits of alcohol nowadays are something like 7 units of alcohol a week for a woman, which is 7 small glasses of wine in a week, that kind of thing, and 14 for a man. But some alcohol is maybe beneficial, but it's when you go to excess and when you go particularly to persistent excessive alcohol. Okay, so reduce stress. So that's a one line for something that includes a whole number of whatever things, whatever works for the individual. So things to reduce stress can include whatever fits: mindfulness, meditation, dancing, educational classes, socializing with friends, all kinds of things, walking, enjoying nature, all of those kind of things. Um, and generally reducing stress, it's not advocated to do it with imbibing of certain substances like too many drugs, or street drug. Obviously street drugs, are too much alcohol or any of that kind of stuff, which is actually suppressing our feelings with something different. But generally reducing stress, because that links into our hormonal systems and is also protective of our heart. So, but as a general theme, reducing stress. Okay, so and it may be, this is from Andrew Weil, who's the integrative medicine doctor from the States, the pioneer. He is also suggesting that it may be helpful to take a multivitamin that provides adequate levels of folic acid and other B vitamins, and that has some antioxidant abilities. Okay, right. So I'm going to go into some individual mind things that we can do to support ourselves. And many of you are likely to already be doing these kind of things, but these are some suggestions. This is not exhaustive by any means, but I've just chosen a few things here, and we'll talk a little bit about how they are thought to support the memory as people get older. So who's heard of Sudoku? Anybody heard of Sudoku? Could you raise your hands if you've heard of it?
Sudoku, it's a game.
The
Sudoku,
game, Sudoku.
game Sudoku.
Yes, heard of it.
Okay, all right, good. At least one person's heard of it. That's good. Okay, thank you, Barbara. Okay, so right, so it's very good for keeping older people's minds sharp by right. So it preserves logical thinking skills. So that's an important skill to use and keep reusing as we get older. Uh, so it uses different parts of the brain that may not necessarily be used in everyday life. So that's part of its helpfulness. It's a logic puzzle which exercises the left hemisphere of the brain. So in basic division, and nothing is completely black and white, but basic division, the left side of the brain is the more logical thinking, more reasoning side of the brain, and the right side is the more creative visuospatial part of the brain. And Sudoku, so Sudoku is kind of uses the logic part, and it teaches what's called fluid intelligence by requiring the same problem solving processes about 50 times each puzzle. So you're doing the same thing over and over. So repeated process, that's thought to be helpful for working on those pathways and preserving those pathways. And also, to solve the puzzles, you need to first recognize what information is relevant. So that's important. All right. So this is a picture of a Sudoku puzzle. So I thought it may be interesting just to show how it works. So
Yeah.
Can you see?
Yep, we all see the screen.
Can you see the screen? Okay. So what you need to do is every long line, every long horizontal line, so that the long horizontal lines have 9 small squares. In each long horizontal line, you need to have the numbers between 1 and 9 only put down once, each number put down one time. So no numbers repeated, but every number between 1 and 9 needs to be represented in every line. So every horizontal line, and also every vertical line, also the numbers individually between 1 and 9 in whatever order fits. And when you start the puzzle, you are given some of the numbers. So you need to be given enough of the numbers to be able to do the puzzle. So all the horizontal lines and all the vertical lines need to have numbers between 1 and 9 in only represented once, each number, and in whatever order fits. And also each of the smaller squares, the the squares of 9 of the smallest squares. So they are marked by a bold black line. So they each one has 9 small squares in it, and they're a square. They also must have the figures, all of the numbers between 1 and 9 represented just once. And so that is the puzzle. That's the puzzle. It's fun. It's fun to do. And so who does Sudoku? Oh, we can ask at the end. We'll ask at the end. Okay, so that's a suggestion of something that's also, it's fun to do. Okay, so in general, as a general category, arts and crafts are a very good activity. And so there are lots of arts and crafts. So whatever fits for you, whether it's drawing, painting, sewing, knitting, doing collages, whatever it is. I mean, even I was going to say even playing a musical instrument, that's not quite arts and crafts, but various things around arts and crafts. So it uses the mind, it keeps the hands busy too. So that's good to have that mind-hand coordination, and it helps to maintain dexterity. That's good. And also being able to explore the creative part of the brain. So that's more of the so-called right side of the brain, and with the use of imagination. And so there are lots of things going for that general category of arts and crafts. So that's really something to go for. Okay, so we've done the number puzzle as in Sudoku, and now word puzzles can definitely help our brains as we get older. The process for solving a word search is to look at the clue of a few letters to find a word. So that looking for a few letters to find a word, that's a very helpful, repetitive activity to do, and it sharpens reasoning skills. So definitely all kinds of word puzzles, whether that's crosswords, whether that's stuff like Wordle, and there's something called Spelling Bee. They're all good. Oh, sorry, I've jumped over something. Okay, right, this is interesting. So learning a second language has been linked to higher cognitive reserve, better performance in executive control. I think that's reasoning control, changes in brain structure and function relative to people who speak one language, and delay in dementia onset. So I think for those of you who speak English and Afrikaans, I think it's going to need to be a third language. So learning a second language, or a second or third language, seems to be a promising avenue for cognitive enhancement in older adults. So that's really something to seriously consider, because there are particular pathways that are opened up, and it may be fun also. So that's kind of interesting. And then chess is a game of strategy, and strengthens logical reasoning and problem solving, particularly among elderly chess players. Okay, so that is okay. Of course, combining mental and physical training through activities such as dancing is a very good way to do things. Very good thing, because it keeps, you have some fitness, but you also have some working on kind of your spatial orientation and rhythm. That's very good, and also your mind body coordination, and also it can be sociable. And there's been research done that has shown dancing to be contributing to reduction of dementia. So that's something to consider. And as I've said, before, and it's important to emphasize, you do physical activity within the limits that you can do, but so it doesn't have to be like hip hop, big dancing, but you can do some movement, maybe really enjoyable, and it's helpful. So that's what I've got, and we're now open to thought. So not just questions, but thoughts, comments, and questions. Okay, so I think I'll stop the share and then open to thoughts, questions, comments.
We got Roz here who's got a question.
Okay.
Are you talking about me? No. Yeah, I got that all the time. Did you hear, Dr. Stern?
I didn't, unfortunately. It sounded amusing, but I didn't. I heard you laugh. I didn't hear the question, unfortunately.
The question that Raz is asking is about word retrieval. If I'm looking for the correct word and I just can't get it, and that happens to me a lot, and oftentimes it's the same words that I can't place. I'll remember it later, but just not in the context. That's the question that Raz is asking.
Yeah, and is that like in a word puzzle or when she's talking or engaging in conversation? Yeah.
In conversation or explaining things, or in my case, in the middle of lecturing.
Yeah. Well, I think some degree of that is happens with getting older, and that name retrieval is more difficult. But then there are so maybe there are various ways of cues that maybe will help you. So if you maybe write down certain things beforehand, if you have like post-it notes, maybe that will flag it more clearly in your memory. If there are I don't know if there are particular word like patterns or words that or names that you forget, or if it's just in the moment, it's a different name here and a different name there. Is it like a regular thing that you forget, or is it just different names wherever you, depending on the conversation that you're in?
People's names.
People's names generally, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is something that can happen when you do get older. I don't know, maybe if you imagine if it's particular people, imagine their faces and just say the name to yourself beforehand when you're on or when you're on your own. Maybe that will have more of an association with it and it'll be easier to retrieve. I do think that there's also an element of when we get anxious or when we're stressed and have a lot on, then it can be natural to forget more things. So I wonder if it may also be a bit related. If you notice if there's a difference, if you're in a more calm time and relaxed, if it's easier for you to recall names. Do you find anything like that?
On the spot, it's harder to remember than
It's on the spot,
otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah, it's on the spot. Yeah, it just maybe try not to be on the spot too much, but that's very much easier said than done because sometimes it's just on the spot, isn't it? I think it does go a bit naturally with aging, but you can maybe when you're in your own space just see if you can like write down some names or try and associate names with faces and see if it's any better there. But it is a bit of a natural thing as we get older.
Thank you. We got another question. Do you hear the question, Doctor?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
I'll repeat it. The question was, how does one know when they have dementia? Is it they wake up one day, they're 95 years old, and they're forgetting things? Is it sudden or is it gradual? Is it a buildup? How does one know?
It's usually a gradual thing. It's usually a build up, and it will be you'll just so it will be the degree of memory loss, the degree of forgetting regular things. For example, if people have dementia, they can get kind of easily. So previously, like spatially, like if they walked home or drove home a certain way, then when the dementia's coming in, they like lose that orientation of where they are spatially, for example. But it will be it's a gradual build up, and it will be a usually a variety of things related to memory, a variety of things that they'll forget, and it will just be out of the like clearly out of the norm. So for example, some memory loss for names is normal, but it won't affect your regular activities of daily living. So you'll be able to remember where your clothes are, dressing yourself, and doing like washing, eating, that kind of thing, and you'll have a reasonable flow in the day. But dementia, when it comes in, is going to be affecting that, and you'll just know it's out of the ordinary.
Which is more damaging, dementia or Alzheimer's? Isn't Alzheimer's a form of dementia?
It's a form of dementia.
What are the differences? Maybe you could clarify to us different forms of dementia so we just understand the
distinctions. So the two common causes of dementia are Alzheimer's, where there's a particular changes that happen in the brain, and that will tend to, so it may come on a bit earlier than the other common causes, multi-infarct dementia, which is related to cardiovascular disease and small clots. So mini strokes, you won't actually notice them as a stroke, as in a weakness of a part of the body, but there'll be just mini strokes that affect the blood supply to the brain. Those are by far the commonest causes of dementia. So Alzheimer's tends to occur a bit earlier, and there may be a family history that goes with Alzheimer's, and there is and when they have a look at they do special scans, or have a look at the brains of people with Alzheimer's, there's a particular kind of pathology or changes that happen in the brain material. But both of those common causes can cause significant memory loss. So those are the common causes, and then we mentioned some other causes which are less common, and those are things like trauma to the head, so repeated trauma to the head, for example, in sports people, so traumatic head injury, and then we mentioned so excessive alcohol consumption over a longish period of time will cause particular changes in the brain in some people and can lead to memory loss, and also some infections can, but that's rarer. Does that clarify that?
Question is ITA a mini stroke?
TIA. So so a transient ischemic attack is called a mini stroke, and that's generally the changes of a stroke, but they clear up within 24 hours. So they've resolved after that time. But if you have had a mini stroke, then that can increase the likelihood or the risk of having a stroke. So it's definitely recommended, if somebody has had a mini stroke and recovered, that investigations are done.
If one is so to say one knows that genetically they're predisposed to dementia, say both their parents had it, what can one do well in advance to try to prevent it? Is it preventable?
Well, we talked about those the 12 preventable or potentially preventable to some degree contributors to dementia, which will give you some protection and some kind of resilience against dementia. So those are things that we mentioned. So educational, having good education when you're young. So there were 12 things that we mentioned. Not drinking excessively, having regular exercise, trying to keep your weight in check, those kind of things. If you have hearing loss, so that's really important. And there's been quite an emphasis on that. So hearing loss, say in older age, that's affecting your communication, cognition, it's really helpful and important that that's managed. And when people, for example, have hearing aids that are working well, it can actually reduce the susceptibility to developing dementia. So there are those potentially modifiable factors that, so certainly that can reduce the incidence, and then all the things that we mentioned really. So it's using your mind, doing the word games and so on, having some exercise, arts and crafts, all of that stuff that will give you some ballast against it.
Is it not reversible is the question. If it's detected at some point.
Oh, okay. Well, which one? So do you mean, so is that, say, Alzheimer's? Well, if we're talking about Alzheimer's or the infarcts in the brain, there's already some damage that has been done to the brain tissue. So for example, for example, in the multi-infarct dementia, where you've got those little strokes in those parts of the brain, I'm not sure that those parts of the brain can be made new again, but I suppose in all those things that you're doing to support yourself, you are maximizing the use of the other parts of the brain. So I suppose what matters is how you are functionally afterwards. To my knowledge, I'm not sure that the changes in Alzheimer's are reversible. But actually, so one of the things that I didn't mention in the talk is that having good quality sleep is also thought to be that's an important and a helpful thing to and that can help to protect to some degree against it. But when the changes are there, I'm not sure the degree of reversibility of those actual pathological changes that can happen.
How does one measure what's a good quality of sleep?
Oh, okay. Well, so it is recommended. So there's like to generally have at least 7 hours of sleep a night, generally 7 to 9 hours of sleep a night. So you should wake up feeling rested, refreshed, energetic, hopefully for the day, and also like your cognitive abilities and sharpness should be that all those processes that happen during, there are several processes that happen during sleep, including the helping with retrieval of memories, metabolic processes that help the hormonal settling. So you should hopefully after a good night's sleep feel energetic, at least to a reasonable degree, and also cognitively relatively sharp and feel that refreshment after sleep. And it's I know that some people like have a short amount of sleep, 4 hours, 5 hours sleep, are previous prime minister in the UK, so Margaret Thatcher famously had about 4 hours sleep a night and got through on that. But I think that generally isn't thought to be, it's generally thought that more than that would be helpful, maybe up to 7 hours of sleep or 9 hours sleep. But there's going to be a lot of variability between people. But that's the general kind of theme. You should, around good sleep, you should generally feel kind of refreshed energetically and also refreshed cognitively.
Sure. Repeat the stem. Okay, the question, I hope I can say clearly. The question being asked is, has there been any stem cell development that can recharge or reverse? Retard, to stop the Alzheimer's.
I don't know about that. I can't tell you about that. I'm afraid. Has somebody heard that there has been?
Just curious.
Oh, somebody's okay. Curious. Okay. I don't know. I'm afraid.
Right. You got to go back. You got to come back to our Decisions of Faith course for that. But if you want to hear Dr. Stern's perspective, the quality of life, how badly is that impacted and affected? I mean, people, yeah, maybe you could elaborate on that.
When people have dementia?
Yes.
Well, it will depend on the degree of dementia, certainly, and how impacted people's everyday living is. So I think we're going into maybe some ethical territory. So in terms of, yeah, if people are aware of what's going on, then maybe that can be even more upsetting and disturbing for them. And if they're noticing like the limitations of of that so many aspects of their mind which carried them in their lives previously. So if there's that awareness, then there can be a huge impact in quality of life. So yeah, I think it can be very big. Of course, because this is a major computer, amazing computer network of our how we navigate the world, how we function in the world. And when that is so affected in terms of elements of the core functioning of it, it's going to be huge, potentially.
Doctor, I see someone's asking, you mentioned about alcoholic consumption. You said in moderation. The question is, obviously not excessive, but I've heard in the past that drinking a glass of wine a day is beneficial. Is there any truth to that? Or should one really avoid alcohol altogether?
No, I think that there is some truth to the drinking a glass of wine. And there are some substance a day that can be beneficial. I think it may be red wine a bit more than white wine, but there are some substances in the wine that are thought to be beneficial.
Would that apply to whiskey, vodka, beer, or any other alcohols?
It's a good question. I haven't heard that it is applied to other spirits and so on. But particularly to wine, I've heard it. I mean, it's kind of known in terms of wine.
Question being asked is, are there any chronic medications that accelerate? And I guess we can extend that question and not only medications, but are there things that cause it? You mentioned anxiety earlier, stress.
Yeah. So was the initial part of the question, was it about, are there any medications that cause it?
Yeah, they're chronic. Is that you asking about chronic medications that cause? Yeah, chronic medications that would accelerate dementia.
Not that I obviously know or that springs to mind. I mean, so if that's, I mean, there are so, well, not that obviously springs to mind. I mean, a lot, when we're prescribing medications, we want to, certain medications, you need to like monitor blood tests when you're giving them, you need to monitor blood pressure, that kind of thing. So we want to make sure the cardiovascular system is healthy. We want to make sure the kidney function is healthy. And then if they're and the blood pressure is controlled, and if they're controlled, then that will reduce that pressure on dementia. I can't talk for every single medication. Maybe there are some medications out there where they have in the small print of the associations an increase, some increased chance of dementia. But I mean, if that's in there, then they need to be given very judiciously with monitoring. But there isn't an obvious one that immediately springs to mind for me. Okay, so then the second part of the question was about what can we do to prevent to prevent dementia. So yeah, it is. So it's all those things that we mentioned, but definitely reducing stress, connecting with other people, doing those mind games, some exercising, also number puzzles with numbers like Sudoku. That's all helpful. But in terms of reducing stress can be helpful. It's like helpful for so many conditions, and the reduction of stress changes the hormonal balance in the body, and then there are more hormones which are circulating, which are which, like your heart and your cardiovascular system, which are cardioprotective. So that's how reducing stress links in there. And so, whatever helps people to reduce their stress, whatever activities.
I think the question was the opposite end of the spectrum. What exacerbates it more? Other things
What exacerbates stress?
No, what exacerbates dementia? What causes it? So the question.
Well, those 12 factors that I mentioned in the talk. So ranging from low educational attainment in when you're young, to hearing problems in older age. So having that attended to can reduce the risk of getting dementia. To things like avoiding obviously, like if you're doing sports, so just being mindful when you're younger of having those traumatic head injuries, avoiding social isolation. Those were the factors, and then managing stress can also play a good part in it.
The question being asked is it hereditary? Is it genetic, you're asking? Meaning if one's parents got it, or do you think you get it from your kids? The question being asked is it hereditary?
I think there's some degree of dementia that has a hereditary component. So maybe the next time we do, because there are several good questions here, thoughtful questions with some detail here. So maybe we'll get some more specifics on that the next time that we do a talk. So there is definitely some genetic component to Alzheimer's disease, but I can give you some more information the next time on the degree of that.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions, thoughts, comments? I just want to say thank you so much to the doctor for presenting us, for addressing us here today on this very important topic that
Yeah.
obviously we have a lot of questions on. And some of the
Yeah.
things you mentioned about the activities, I think we do them right here. So, ladies and
That's
gents,
fantastic. It's
yeah,
fantastic that you do them.
well, we just had bingo started, so everyone come back for bingo tomorrow. Thank you, Rebitz and Miriam. We got beating. What else have we got here? Memory classes on a Monday morning. You have yoga, breathing, stretching, exercise on a Tuesday, art therapy, music
Wow.
therapy, fun physiotherapy. So there's a lot goes on here to help prevent it. A lot of what you had discussed and addressed
Yeah.
down here.
You're ticking all the boxes, you guys.
And to all of you who are part of it. Thank you, Rebitz and Miriam. And thank you, Dr. Adam Stern, for today's talk.
Okay, thank you.
All the best. Stay well, stay warm. What's the weather like in the UK?
It's actually not too bad eventually. I mean, so we don't really tend to have much. Well, no, we've got summer at the moment, so we're right in summer. Generally in June, end of June, last 2 weeks in June, July, August, a bit of September, summer here. But it's short, but it's much shorter summer than in South Africa.
Enjoy every moment of it. All the best.
Okay, thanks.